I know him! Hey cookie creators and lovers alike, I'm Gabby. It's that time of year again, so travel with me through the 7 layers of the candy cane forest, because today on the Cool Cookie Show, we're making elf cookies. For the Etch-a-sketch, we'll start by flooding the main doodle screen in a gray. For my piping consistency icing, I'll be using a number 1 Ateco tip. And for my 15-second consistency flooding icing, I'll be using a number 2 Wilton tip. Now we'll let this layer dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and flood the classic red. Now we'll let this layer dry for 6 to 12 hours before we add the white knobs and some fun writing. Now I'll let these layers dry for 6 to 12 hours before I go in and add some writing to the Etch-a-sketch. Now I'll use a food coloring marker to write a fun message on my Etch-a-sketch cookie. This Etch-a-sketch is all done and ready to spread the word. For my elf leg cookies, I'm going to start by flooding the entire surface of the cookie white to give a nice clean canvas to put my drawing on. For my piping consistency icing, I'm using a number 1 Ateco tip. And for my 15-second consistency flooding icing, I'm using a regular squeeze bottle that would equivalent to the same size as a Wilton 3 tip. Now we'll let this layer dry for 6 to 12 hours before we go in and start creating elf's legs. For elf's legs, I've used my projector as well as a food coloring marker to mark some guidelines for my piping and my flooding. Now I'll let these layers dry for 20 minutes to an hour before I go in and flood some more. Now we'll let this layer dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and give him his bright yellow stockings. Now we'll let these layers dry for 6 to 12 hours before we go in and complete our piping detail. Elf is all done and ready to spread some Christmas cheer by singing loud for all to hear. For our New York snow globe, I'm going to start by flooding the base in a gray. For my piping consistency icing, I'm using a number 1 Etch-a-sketch tip, and for my 15-second consistency flooding icing, I'll be using a number 2 Wilton tip. Now I'll let this layer dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before I go in and flood the blue sky. Now we'll let these layers dry for 6 to 12 hours before we go in and add our New York skyline. Now I'll let these layers dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before I go in and add some more flooding. Now we'll let this layer dry for about 20 minutes to an hour before we go in and finish the rest of its flooding. Now we'll let this layer dry for 6 to 12 hours before we do our piping detail and give this globe some snow. Now with some piping consistency icing and some bally white sprinkles, let's add some snow to our snow globe. Watch out for the swirly twirly gumdrops. This snow globe's all done. New York, here we come. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Cool Cookie Show. If you liked this episode, give it a big thumbs up. Want to be a part of the creativity? Let me know what characters and shapes you'd like to see in the comments below. For more of my cookie creations, check out my channel, tune in every Tuesday, and don't forget to subscribe. Till next time, stay sweet!